Hello everyone, and welcome to my Young and the Restless official 24 channel. I hope everyone is having a wonderful day. Before we begin, please hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. Wedding day kickoff while Kane Ashby makes an ambush decision. Phyllis Summer's bad influence may also be on full display, so let's discuss what's coming up in Genoa City. After months of planning, Danny Romalotti and Christine Blair will finally be ready to tie the knot. Christine and Danny found their way back to each other after all these years, so they'll definitely be feeling good about their imminent remarriage. Since the nuptials are about to begin, Y&R spoilers say many of Danny and Christine's loved ones gather to watch. Nina Webster and Gina Roma will even make it back to town, so that'll add a little more blast from the past flavor to the ceremony. Daniel Romalotti Jr. will ultimately walk Christine down the aisle as she shows off the dress that fans voted for on social media. Once Christine joins Danny, Michael Baldwin will have the great honor of officiating. While Danny and Christine move forward with their wedding vows, Phyllis may stir up some trouble by influencing Kane's next move. Although Phyllis would love to cause a scene at the nuptials, she may manipulate Kane into doing it instead. Kane still carries some terrible guilt over what happened to Chance Chancellor and Damien Kane in Nice, so Phyllis may push him to apologize to Nina and Amy Lewis during the wedding festivities. Even if Kane doesn't end up crashing until the reception, he'll indeed derail things a bit soon enough. Although Carter was the one who wiped Chance and Damien off the map, Kane will still be sorry for inviting them to the bash and dragging them into a situation that ended their lives. Once Kane decides to make his bold move, Phyllis will do some lurking and will inevitably cause a little drama of her own. We should mention that this is only part 1 of all the wedding excitement, so fans will want to stay tuned for part 2 since it's coming up on November 24th. Christine and Danny's marriage ceremony will be an event to remember, so we'll bring you updates on any other wedding-related news. The wedding day dawned over Genoa City with a shimmering sense of hope, nostalgia, and the kind of emotional warmth that only a long-awaited reunion like Danny Romalotti and Christine Blair's could generate. After months of planning, debating colors, revisiting memories, smoothing out guest lists, and navigating the occasional crisis that only Genoa City could deliver, they were finally ready to tie the knot again, to reclaim a love that had survived decades, heartbreaks, rivalries, career shifts, and personal reinventions. Christine, forever cricket to many who'd loved her through the years, awoke with a smile she hadn't worn in ages, a smile that spoke to destiny circling back and giving her a second chance. Danny felt it too, the sensation of the past aligning with the present in a way that felt ordained, almost written in the stars. They'd traveled through so many ups and downs, chased dreams, suffered losses, and still, after it all, found their way back to each other. As they prepared for their imminent remarriage, the sense of rightness, of grounded certainty, grew with each passing minute. The excitement was infectious, carried into the ceremony as many of their loved ones gathered to witness the moment. There was something magical about seeing familiar faces take their seats, faces who had been witness to their youth, their mistakes, their triumphs, their heartbreaks, and now their renewal. Nina Webster returned to town with a soft smile and a deep well of memories, carrying the complicated history she shared with both Christine and Danny. Meanwhile, Gina Roma's arrival brought a surge of deep nostalgia that could almost be felt physically, like a warm wave rolling across the room. Gina had seen Danny evolve from a young rock star heartthrob to the wiser, gentler man he had become. Their presence added a blast from the past flavor to the ceremony, a reminder that not only was this wedding a celebration of the future, but a love letter to everything that came before. As the guests whispered excitedly, Daniel Romalotti Jr. prepared himself for the emotional honor ahead. Christine had chosen him, chosen the son she'd helped raise and loved dearly, to walk her down the aisle, and the significance wasn't lost on either of them. When she finally stepped forward in the dress that fans had voted for on social media, she looked radiant, glowing with a blend of serenity and anticipation. The gown was a perfect fusion of vintage elegance and modern sensibility, soft lace, graceful lines, delicate beading that sparkled subtly under the ceremony lights. Daniel's throat tightened at the sight of her, and Christine reached for his arm, squeezing it with gratitude and affection. Their bond was an anchor, one created through perseverance and loyalty across decades. As Daniel walked her down the aisle, everyone rose to their feet, a collective wave of warmth filling the room. Danny's expression said everything: love, awe, relief, and the emotional gravity of a man who knew he was being given an extraordinary gift. He stood waiting for his bride with a full heart as Michael Baldwin stepped forward, taking his place to officiate. Michael, who had seen Christine through so many battles both personal and professional, felt deeply honored, and as he lifted his gaze to the couple, the ceremony took on an almost sacred quiet. The words he spoke blended the past with the present, a reminder of the roads they'd taken to get here, the love they'd never fully let go of, and the bright future waiting ahead. Yet even in the glow of such joy, shadows lingered around the edges of the celebration, carried in quietly by Kane Ashby, and those shadows had a familiar flame fanning them: Phyllis Summers. While Danny and Christine moved forward with their heartfelt vows, Phyllis kept her distance, her expression sharp and watchful, calculating her next move like a woman who thrived on disruption and emotional chaos. She would have loved nothing more than to cause a scene herself, to reclaim her old role as the wild card at any gathering where Christine was the center of attention, but she was also clever enough to know when to outsource the drama. Kane Ashby, vulnerable, guilt-ridden, and teetering on emotional collapse, had become the perfect tool. Kane still carried unbearable guilt over what happened to Chance Chancellor and Damian Kane and Nice, the unexpected danger, the disastrous fallout, and the horrifying reality that they never made it home alive. Even though Carter had ultimately been responsible for wiping both men off the map, Kane had been the one who brought them there, the one who dragged them into the situation that had sealed their fate. That guilt ate at him daily, and Phyllis, sensing the weakness like a shark detecting blood in the water, seized the opportunity. She whispered poisonous encouragement into his ear, urging him to cleanse his conscience by apologizing to Nina Webster and Amy Lewis, encouraging him to choose that exact moment, that exact day, to bare his soul and disrupt the ceremony with raw emotion. She framed it as redemption. But she knew better. Phyllis wasn't interested in Kane's healing, she wanted chaos, fallout, fractures in the emotional foundation Christine and her loved ones were building today. Kane gave in to the pressure slowly, the weight of his guilt folding him inward until the idea of apologizing, no matter how inappropriate the timing, felt like the only way he could breathe again. He watched the ceremony unfold with a tortured expression, trying to hold himself together but failing more with each passing second. Michael continued officiating with grace as Christine and Danny exchanged emotional promises, yet Kane's internal world began spiraling. Even if he didn't crash the vows themselves, Kane would derail things soon enough, if not during the ceremony, then certainly at the reception. The question was no longer if, but when. And through it all, Phyllis lingered close by, lurking in the shadows with the kind of sly satisfaction that suggested she had plans of her own. She was the spark to Kane's emotional explosion, and she fully intended to be there to watch the fire burn. When the ceremony reached its emotional peak, when Danny and Christine finally sealed their vows with a tender, unforgettable kiss, the audience erupted into applause, wiping away tears and celebrating the powerful renewal of a love story decades in the making. But even then, even in that shimmering moment of joy, the threads of tension continued tightening behind the scenes. Kane slipped away from the crowd briefly, trying to catch his breath, leaning against a quiet hallway wall as guilt surged through him like a tidal wave. His mind replayed images of Chance and Damian's final moments, the horror, the chaos, the helplessness. The idea of facing Nina and Amy felt terrifying, but the guilt felt worse. And then Phyllis appeared again, stepping out of a shadowed side corridor with that practiced look of false sympathy paired with self-interest. She encouraged him in hushed tones, pushing him harder, reminding him that Nina deserved to hear the truth, that Kane had to do the right thing, even though they both knew Phyllis's true motives were rooted in destruction rather than righteousness. By the time the ceremony concluded and guests flowed into the reception area, Kane had made his decision. He would confront Nina and Amy. He would unburden himself. He would do it tonight, no matter the consequences. And as he walked into the lively room filled with laughter, music, and champagne, Phyllis trailed just a few steps behind, anticipation gleaming in her eyes. She could almost taste the drama about to unfold. Kane moved through the crowd with shaky determination, his jaw tight, his expression tormented. Meanwhile, Phyllis scanned the room, ready to stir the pot further once Kane's confession lit the first spark. Guests remained blissfully unaware of the emotional bomb ticking within the room as Christine and Danny enjoyed their first dance. The newlyweds swayed softly to a classic melody that carried echoes of their youth, memories of the original songs Danny once sang, of concerts, of stolen glances and whispered promises through the years. They looked into each other's eyes as if the rest of the world had fallen away, blissfully unaware of the storm gathering just a few yards behind them. Gina Roma dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. Nina watched with a warm smile. Michael Baldwin and Lauren Fenmore exchanged a knowing look, moved by the full-circle joy of watching old friends reunite in such profound happiness. But Kane couldn't hold his silence any longer. His steps faltered as he reached Nina, and when she turned toward him with that familiar gentle warmth, his voice broke. He apologized, haltingly at first, then more urgently, the words spilling out faster as he confessed how deeply responsible he felt for Chance and Damien's deaths. Nina's expression shifted, tension entering her eyes as she registered the emotional volatility behind his words. Amy, too, tensed, stepping closer to Nina with a concerned frown. And then the room shifted. Conversations hushed. Faces turned. A ripple of awareness spread as Kane's trembling voice carried. The wedding reception atmosphere cracked, and Phyllis, standing just behind Kane, watching the scene bloom into chaos, allowed herself a tiny smirk of satisfaction. And yet, even as the tension rose, the wedding celebration held firm, refusing to let darkness swallow the light entirely. Guests and family rallied, guiding Kane away gently, offering Nina comfort, and allowing Christine and Danny's joy to remain untouched at the center of the day's most important promise. This emotional whirlwind, Kane's guilt, Phyllis's meddling, Nina's heartbreak, was only part one of the unfolding wedding saga. Part 2 would arrive on November 24th, bringing more twists, more tears, more nostalgia, and possibly more explosive fallouts as the reception rolled into the night. Promise that Christine and Danny's ceremony will remain an unforgettable event, filled with all the emotion, drama, and history that only a couple like them could inspire. More wedding-related shockers are just around the corner, and Genoa City won't be the same once they unfold. The energy in the room shifted the moment Kane's trembling apology cracked through the happiness humming around Christine and Danny's reception. The sudden emotional rupture hit the party like a gust of icy wind, sharp, unexpected, impossible to ignore. Nina Webster stood frozen, her eyes widening as Kane's voice thickened with regret. The guilt he had been dragging around for months, guilt that clung to him like a second skin, was now spilling into the open with raw, haunting force. Guests who had been laughing moments before fell into startled silence, the joyful buzz flattening into a tense stillness as eyes and conversation swung toward the commotion unfolding near the bar. And behind Kane, as expected, hovered Phyllis Summers, her posture angled like a flame-seeking dry wood, her expression caught between sympathy and strategic pleasure. She didn't have to say a word. Her presence alone was enough to ignite suspicion. Christine, still flushed from dancing with Danny, caught the shift before she understood the source. Her head turned, brow knitting with confusion as she followed the ripples of unease seeping through the room. Danny's hand tightened gently around her waist, recognizing the flicker in her expression, that wariness she had developed over decades of dealing with crises at the worst possible times. "It's fine," he murmured, hoping to keep her rooted in their moment. But Christine was already slipping into protective mode, emotionally shifting from glowing bride to the Christine who handled legal emergencies with calm command. She scanned the crowd, her eyes landing on Nina, and the moment she spotted Kane across from her, face twisted with remorse, she understood. Her heart sank. Not tonight. Not now. Nina's voice trembled as she processed Kane's confessions, fragmented sentences laced with anguish. He kept repeating that he was sorry, that he never meant for any of it to happen, that he never imagined the danger that would befall Chance and Damien. His hands shook violently, and his breathing hitched, each inhale thinner than the last as the weight of months threatened to crush him on the spot. Amy Lewis, uncertain how to react and already overwhelmed by her own grief for Damien, stepped closer to Nina, her breath catching as Kane unraveled in front of them like a man drowning. Phyllis, appearing oh so concerned, lifted a hand to her throat dramatically, looking around as if shocked by Kane's public breakdown. But the telltale spark in her eyes betrayed her satisfaction. This was precisely the spectacle she'd hoped for, Kane falling apart in front of the entire room, Christine's wedding bliss cracking under the strain, and Nina being emotionally sideswiped at an event meant to be celebratory. Phyllis had slipped a match into the emotional powder keg and now watched from the sidelines as sparks shot outward. Kane's voice rose again, tight, choked, and unsteady. Nina. Amy. I never should have asked them to come. I never should have acted like it was safe. I didn't think, he stammered, shaking his head hard as if trying to reverse time with sheer force. I didn't think anything like that could happen. But I was wrong. And I'm so damn sorry. You deserve to hear that. You deserve the truth. Nina pressed a hand to her chest, her eyes suddenly damp. She wasn't angry, not immediately. Instead she was stunned, blindsided by the emotional punch. She looked so freshly raw that it was almost painful to witness. Amy, on the other hand, flinched with a sharpness that suggested anger simmering beneath her grief. Her jaw tightened as she watched Kane struggle, the muscles in her face tensing like coiled wire. Nearby, Jill Abbott and Lauren Fenmore exchanged glances that dripped with concern and exasperation. Jill, who had just settled into enjoying the nostalgic glow of Danny and Christine's wedding, now looked like she was ready to storm across the room and drag Kane out by the arm herself. Lauren muttered under her breath, "Phyllis," with a sigh that carried years of familiarity with the redhead's capacity for chaos. Danny and Christine joined the circle of onlookers slowly, reluctantly pulled from their intimate bubble by the gravity of Kane's implosion. Christine's expression softened with immediate concern for Nina, but the longer her gaze lingered, the more she recognized the manipulative choreography behind this disaster. And when her eyes eventually landed on Phyllis standing right behind Kane, her heart clenched with recognition. Of course Phyllis was involved. Of course she was. Phyllis, realizing Christine had spotted her lurking, plastered on a look of delicate surprise, widening her eyes as if she had nothing to do with anything happening. But Christine's lips pressed together in that familiar tight line, one Phyllis knew well. It was the look that meant Christine was about one breath away from calling her out publicly. Michael Baldwin, ever the voice of grounding reason at Genoa city gatherings, stepped forward, trying to gently defuse the situation. Kane, he said quietly, his voice steady but authoritative. This isn't the time. You're overwhelmed. Let's step outside, all right? Let's take a moment. But Kane was past the point of hearing reason. His guilt had twisted into desperation. He needed Nina to understand, needed her to hear him, needed something to absolve the unbearable heaviness pressing down on him. No, he insisted, taking a shaky step forward. I have to say this now. I have to tell you everything. Amy lifted her chin, voice slicing through the tension like a blade. And you choose this moment? This wedding? You think this is healing for anyone but you? Her words cracked with furious grief. You want to unload your conscience at Christine and Danny's wedding? How selfish can you be? Her voice echoed through the room, and the crowd recoiled with a collective gasp. For the first time, Kane paused. The blow hit. His expression crumbled as he realized what he'd done, not just to Nina and Amy, but to the entire celebration. The horror of it lodged in his chest like a stone, and he staggered. Nina finally reached out, touching Kane's arm lightly, her voice quiet but strained. Kane, we can talk. But not here. Not now. There was compassion beneath her pain, but also resolve. Nina wasn't going to let the grief of Chance's memory be twisted into a spectacle. She had lived through enough of that already. Kane's eyes filled with tears, the kind that came from a place of deep, relentless remorse. Before he could speak again, Christine finally stepped forward, still composed, still every bit the woman who had balanced grace and strength for decades. Let's step outside, she urged gently, guiding Nina with a hand on her back and giving Kane a subtle nod to follow. It was her wedding day, but she wasn't about to let a friend face something like this alone. Danny followed at her side, placing his hand on Christine's shoulder for support. He had always admired her compassion, how she could set aside her own joy to help those she cared about. Yet the flicker of frustration in his eyes made it clear that even he wasn't immune to the disruption. Phyllis watched them go, her smile fading as she realized the attention was shifting away from the drama she'd hoped would explode even bigger. And to her growing irritation, no one seemed inclined to blame Christine or Danny, no one was storming out, no one was calling the event ruined. If anything, the guests seemed to be pulling closer, reassuring one another, refocusing on the couple at the center of the celebration. Jill beelined toward Phyllis, arms crossed. "What did you do?" she demanded, her eyes drilling into her. "Because this has your fingerprints all over it." Phyllis feigned innocence, placing a hand on her chest. "Me? Jill, please. I'm just trying to be here for Kane. He's falling apart." Lauren snorted.